Napoleon Bonaparte, master of Europe. From Corsica to Paris, from soldier to emperor, Napoleon Bonaparte's story is one of ambition, brilliance, and downfall. It's the story of the man who tried to master Europe. Let's start at the beginning. Napoleon was born in 1769 on the Mediterranean island of Corsica, which had just been acquired by France 3 years before. This wouldn't be relevant to his story until much later. Sent to military school in France at age 9, he learned artillery, discipline, and strategy. He excelled at his studies, graduating top of his class. But he was an outsider, mocked for his accent and looks. Nicknamed Little Corporal stuck to him. Determined to rise above his origins, he joined the army. At age 23, he got his chance to shine. The French Revolution broke out in 1789, toppling the French monarchy and replacing it with a republic. There was war with Austria, and young Bonaparte distinguished himself at the siege of Toulon. Retaking the city from the British and Royalist forces, he impressed his superiors, but he was not yet famous. That would come after he led an army to victory in northern Italy. Against all odds, he defeated Austrian forces, forcing them to retreat all the way back to Vienna. By his mid-20s, he was a national hero. But the revolution wasn't over. In 1799, France was in chaos. The Directory of the government in place in 1795 was seen as corrupt and ineffective. Rival coalitions of European powers were threatening France. The situation was dire, but out of this chaos, Napoleon saw opportunity. He traveled to Egypt, hoping to disrupt British trade routes, but this was more of an adventure than a military campaign. Soon after, he returned to France, seized power in a coup, and became first consul. As the head of a new 3-man executive body, he held supreme command of the military and got the title of consul for life. All this at age 30? In reality, it was a dictatorship. He reorganized administration, education, and finance. Most importantly, he brought stability and order to France. People loved it. So when Napoleon crowned himself emperor in 1804, there was little resistance. A year later, he was recognized as the ruler of France by the Congress of Vienna, legitimizing his rule. He reshaped Europe by placing his brothers and allies on the thrones of various states. He was especially proud of Louis I of the Netherlands, Joseph Bonaparte in Spain, and his famously deaf brother Jerome in Westphalia. To the north, however, the British remained untouchable. Napoleon wanted to change that. His dream was to dominate Europe and perhaps even the world. To do this, he needed their navy, especially their navy. And so began a long series of wars against the coalition of European powers who opposed Napoleon's rule. Napoleon won some battles, lost others. But in general, he was successful, extending France's borders further than any previous French king. There was, however, one great victory that overshadowed everything else. It's the Battle of Austerlitz in December 1805. Napoleon decisively defeated the Austrian Empire, cementing his position as the dominant power in Europe. The peace treaty that followed granted him control of northern Italy and the Holy Roman Empire. Then came the Battle of Jena in October 1806, where Napoleon crushed the Prussians. Prussia's king fled, and his territories were occupied by French troops. Napoleon was at the peak of his power. But what about the British? Their navy was still too strong to challenge. To defeat them, he needed an ally. Enter the Russians. Tsar Alexander I initially resisted Napoleon's advances, but he eventually agreed to an alliance. Together, they formed the Third Coalition to destroy the Swedish-Russian alliance and the Ottoman Empire. Now, Napoleon had defeated the Ottomans before, but they still controlled the Bosporus, the strait connecting the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. Napoleon wanted full control of the region, but while planning this, he made a critical mistake. He underestimated the vastness and barrenness of Russia. In the summer of 1812, the Grande set off from northern France, traveling through Central Europe, Poland, Ukraine, all the way to the Russian capital. Along the way, they faced scorched earth tactics, partisan attacks, and the elements. The Grande grew weaker and weaker. Add to this Napoleon's poor health, and we have the makings of a disaster. When the troops entered Moscow, they found the city abandoned and burning. With winter approaching, Napoleon knew he had to get out. But while retreating, his army was ambushed by Russian forces. By the time they reached the Berezina River, only 20,000 soldiers remained. It was a catastrophe. The end of the Grand soon after, the Russians declared war on France. Coalitions were formed. Victories turned into defeats. By early 1814, it was clear Napoleon couldn't win. He abdicated on April and was exiled to the island of Elba off the coast of Italy. He'd hoped to keep some of his fortune and his rank as an emperor, but the victorious powers rejected this. Elba turned out to be a prison rather than a vacation spot. Troops guarded the shore, sentinels patrolled the hills, ships patrolled the sea. But Napoleon was desperate to escape, and he did. On February, he fled Elba and arrived in mainland France. From there, he raised an army and marched on Paris. The government collapsed. Napoleon returned to power, and the 100 Days began. He immediately set to work fixing the military and preparing for another offensive, but it never came. On June, Napoleon's army faced the Duke of Wellington's troops at Waterloo in present-day Belgium. It was a decisive defeat. The next day, he left Paris. Where would he go? Britain offered him Canada, but he refused. Prussia offered him a dukedom in Germany. He also refused. He wanted to stay in Europe, somewhere close to France. The choice fell on the remote island of Saint Helena in the South Atlantic. Here, Napoleon would spend his last 5 years writing his memoirs, meeting his few visitors and watching ships sail by, dreaming of France. On May 1821, he died of stomach cancer. But that's not the end of the story. His legend lived on, celebrated in books and films, criticized in museums and monuments. Who was Napoleon? Was he a brilliant military genius or a ruthless dictator? A liberator or a conqueror? A visionary reformer or a megalomaniac? Perhaps the best answer is that he was all of these things and more. If you want to learn more about Napoleon, watch our series. Click the link in the description below. Thanks for watching.